appreciation of the government for the warm reception extended to the President and his delegation during what was a most successful visit. The government sincerely thanks everyone, organizations and individuals in both the public and private sectors who collaborated in this national effort to ensure that the visit of President Obama and other leaders from the region went smoothly and was such an outstanding success. Our briefing this afternoon will address some of the important outcomes from the bilateral talks between the U.S. delegation led by the President and the Jamaican delegation led by the Most Honorable Prime Minister. Before inviting my colleague, Minister Senator the Honorable A.J. Nicholson, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, to speak to you, I am pleased to recognize the representative from the Embassy of the United States of America here in Kingston, Mr. Joshua Polachek, who is Counselor for Public Affairs at the Embassy. It was only yesterday I had the opportunity of a courtesy visit from Mr. Polachek. He conveyed the appreciation of the United States government for the excellent arrangements and the collaboration in the execution of President Obama's highly successful visit to Jamaica. Minister Nicholson, I now invite you to speak to us.
Thank you, Minister. I am delighted to speak at this briefing for the media on the visit to Jamaica of Honorable Barack Obama, President of the United States of America, for a bilateral encounter with Jamaica at the highest level of government and for a CARICOM U.S. summit. Much has already been written about the program, the agenda, and the outcomes of the visit. Nevertheless, I invite your attention to the following. The President arrived on the 8th of April and was met at the Norman Manley International Airport by a receiving party that included the Governor General, the Prime Minister, and leader of the opposition. He then proceeded to a tour of the Bob Marley Museum. The President remarked in the post-bilateral press conference that it was the most fun that he had had since becoming President, and it was something he had wanted to do for a long time. The first official activity was a bilateral meeting at the office of the Prime Minister on the morning of the 9th of April, that's last week, Thursday. That bilateral meeting was, of course, led on the Jamaican side by the Prime Minister and on the U.S. side by the President. The agenda for the meeting focused on really 5 areas. Jamaica's economic reform program, energy, trade and investment, security, and human resource development. The agenda for the meeting, you should know that the following Jamaican cabinet ministers were present at the bilateral: Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Minister of Finance and Planning, Minister of National Security, Minister of Science, Technology, etc., Minister of Water, Land, etc., Minister of Transport and Works, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Industry, etc., Minister of Agriculture, Labor and Social Security. And the Jamaica's ambassador to the United States was also present. I think also you should know who were present for the United States. On the United States side, of course, the President led that side. You had His Excellency Luis Moreno, the Ambassador of the United States to Jamaica. You had Honorable Ernest Moniz, Secretary of Energy. You'll hear more about him later. Honorable Susan Rice, Assistant to the President and National Security Advisor. Honorable Anita Breckenridge, Assistant to the President and Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations. Honorable Ben Rhodes, Assistant to the President and Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications and Speech Writing. Honorable Carolyn Atkinson, Assistant to the President and Deputy National Security Advisor for International Economics. Honorable Roberta Jacobson, Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemispheric Affairs. Mr. Ricardo Zuniga, Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Western Hemispheric Affairs, National Security Council. Ms. Michelle Patron, Special Advisor to the President and Senior Director for Energy and Climate Change, National Security Council, and Mr. Jeffrey Salaiz, S-A-L-A-I-Z, Director of Western Hemisphere Affairs, National Security Council. The Prime Minister, in her opening remarks, commended the President on his initiative to tackle a number of national and international matters of importance, including 1, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which helped to reverse the adverse economic and social impact of the 2008 economic crisis. 2, the efforts of the U.S. administration to deal with migration. And 3, the diplomatic initiatives designed to normalize relations between the United States and Cuba. The Prime Minister underlined the fact that Jamaica and the United States have enjoyed close diplomatic, economic, and cultural relations over many years. She noted that the United States is by far Jamaica's largest trading partner and acknowledged the fact that our exports to the United States have been aided by the Caribbean Basin Initiative, the WTO waiver for which happily has been extended to the 31st of December 2019. Noting the importance of the private sector as an engine of growth, the Prime Minister asked the President to assist in the development of Jamaica's tradable services and for addressing supply-side constraints in the production of goods. The Prime Minister noted that on taking office in January 2012, this has to do with the economic reform program, the government had to set about rebuilding the economy and restoring confidence. She drew attention to the support received from the IMF Extended Fund Facility Agreement, other multilateral institutions, local financial institutions, and Jamaicans at large, both in the public and the private sectors. The Prime Minister noted that our economic reform program is largely on track and pointed to some of our economic achievements over the last 3 years. She acknowledged that the success we have enjoyed to date has not been painless, as the fiscal measures have also brought a level of hardship on our citizens. She added, however, that we have managed to cushion some of the impact on the most vulnerable by negotiating under the extended fund facility for a capped social spending floor to ensure that the overall level of real spending on critical programs in health, education, and social security was maintained each year. Against that background, the Prime Minister outlined the program for Jamaica to secure additional and adequate low-cost funding if we are to achieve the level of economic growth which is desirable. On the question of energy, the Prime Minister described energy as perhaps the most single important factor affecting our economic performance over the last 40 years. She outlined the focus on energy through a strategy including 1, increasing the proportion of renewables of our energy mix. 2, replacing aged and inefficient electricity generating units with more efficient energy efficient types, replacing oil with cheaper fossil alternatives, especially natural gas. In this regard, we were very pleased to hear that the United States government intends to permit export of natural gas to countries like Jamaica. And 4, promoting conservation in the use of energy regardless of the fuel source. The Prime Minister welcomed the announcement in the wake of the CARICOM meeting with Vice President Biden that OPEC would be supporting a $90 million investment in wind energy by Blue Mountain Renewables Limited. The Prime Minister looked forward to continue for energy projects to be undertaken over the next year or two. On the question of security, the Prime Minister noted that security has been the centerpiece of our bilateral cooperation over the years and expressed appreciation for the engagement of the U.S. side in this area. She looked forward to the continued close cooperation of the United States government to further improve our capacity to undertake counter-narcotics activities, to tackle the illegal arms trade, to counter human trafficking, enhance fisheries protection, and expand capacity for search and rescue operations. The issue of Marcus Garvey, Prime Minister outlined the deep desire of the government and people of Jamaica, and for Garvey supporters everywhere, to have Marcus Mosiah Garvey, our first national hero, cleared of the conviction for mail fraud in the United States in 1923. She emphasized that on the Jamaican side, we continue to hope that the United States will be in a position to exonerate Garvey and have his conviction record expunged. Prime Minister requested the President to consider this matter and offer any support within his authority during his tenure in the White House and beyond, and Jamaica will follow up through the appropriate channels. Now, what was the response of the President? First, he thanked Jamaica for the hospitality that has been extended to him and to his delegation. He pointed to the strong family connections between the United States of America and Jamaica, noting that even his national security advisor, Susan Rice, had cousins in Jamaica. He applauded the government of Jamaica for the work done in dealing with fiscal challenges and underlined the importance attached by the United States to the efforts of Jamaica in the areas of rule of law and corruption. Noting that the Caribbean had suffered tremendously from the 2008 recession, the President agreed that energy was a great concern throughout the region and including in Jamaica. He said that the United States was in a position to provide concrete ideas and assistance. And he cited the examples of OPEC supporting the largest private sector wind project in Jamaica and the largest solar project in the entire Caribbean. The President undertook to initiate other projects through the creation of a task force on energy. On the issue of trade and issues of trade and investment, the President pointed to the need for joint work to implement the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. And he outlined his support for the efforts of the World Bank and the IMF and encouraged the Prime Minister, Simsa Miller, encouraged her in her efforts to maintain a social safety net. The President pointed in particular to the need for investment in education and training, and he promised to lend support in these areas. On the issue of security, the President of the United States praised the professionalism of the Jamaican security forces and pledged to deepen cooperation in this area, working through the CBSI to expand projects considered by Jamaica to be beneficial. CBSI, the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative. The President looked forward to the Youth Town Hall meeting later in the day. I think you were there. And spoke of a $68 million development program for youth in the hemisphere to support education, training, and employment. And in addition, the President launched the Youth Leaders of the Americas Initiative. The program will commence this year with about 24 entrepreneurs and civil society leaders, and will be expanded next year to 250 young leaders. Jamaica is expected to benefit from this program, and one aim of the program is to promote linkages with United States investors and companies to improve competitiveness for youth in the region. On Cuba, the President said that the time was right for the move that he had made, and that his initiatives enjoyed the support of the majority of the Cuban and American people. He acknowledged that differences would not disappear overnight, but undertook to continue a process of dialogue. And on the question of Garvey, national hero, the President indicated that the message had been delivered and had been received. There were further discussions in which Jamaica reiterated appreciation for the help of the United States administration in the deal with the IMF, and pointed to the larger issue of economic growth, which was now the big priority. This required growth capital from the World Bank and others. The question of pursuing discussions on debt relief was also put on the table for Jamaica and CARICOM. It was agreed that the Minister of Finance would pursue these matters the following week, this week, on his visit to Washington, D.C., and you have already reported that he is in Washington, D.C. Jamaica also pointed to the need for the United States to increase its investment footprint in Jamaica as a means to spur growth and job creation. In reply, the President indicated that his team had heard the Jamaican proposals and would follow up on the international finance issues that had been raised. He also undertook to remain in contact with a broader investment strategy. As you know, the bilateral encounter at the highest level of government was followed by statements to the press by the Prime Minister and the President and members of the media. You would have witnessed that. After the bilateral, there was a brief meet and greet at the OPM with a cross-section of Jamaicans representing the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, churches, the academia, private sector, and civil society. The aim was to provide an opportunity for the President to interact with as many Jamaicans as possible within the constraints of the short time frame for the visit. And the rest of the bilateral program included and ended with a youth town hall meeting that was televised and a wreath-laying ceremony in Heroes Park that was also televised. The final activity was a ceremonial farewell at the Norman Manley International Airport. What then of the CARICOM USA Summit? As you would expect, a more detailed report of this meeting. However, that summit was held on the 9th of April at the UWI regional headquarters up at Mona. All CARICOM countries were represented by their head of government except Belize and Suriname. The agenda for the meeting was worked out with the US side by the CARICOM Secretariat and the caucus of CARICOM ambassadors in Washington, D.C. A caucus of CARICOM heads of government was held at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade the day before to iron out the final preparations for the subject and for a brief on logistics. The summit was chaired by Prime Minister of the Bahamas in his capacity as chairman of CARICOM. There were opening addresses by the Prime Minister of Jamaica as host, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, and the President of the United States. These addresses were televised live. The summit provided an opportunity for CARICOM leaders to bring to the attention of the President issues of concern to the region, primarily in the areas of competitiveness, including trade, ICT, and the threat to the regional financial system, energy, and security. And it was evident that for the United States, cooperation in alternative sources of energy and energy efficiency is a priority. The President has announced an additional $20 million facility to encourage investment in clean energy projects in the Caribbean and Central America. The feedback from the CARICOM Secretariat and member states has been extremely positive. The meeting was regarded as a useful encounter on both sides, and both sides will follow up on the issues that have been raised. The CARICOM US Summit was facilitated by the decision of the government of Panama to arrange a Copa Charter flight to take CARICOM heads and their delegations from Kingston to Panama City in the evening of 9th of April to the Summit of the Americas. The transition from Kingston to Panama would certainly not have been smooth without the kind offer of Panama to arrange this charter. So finally, what is the evaluation from our perspective? The government of Jamaica is extremely satisfied with the visit, both the bilateral and the CARICOM US Summit. It served to underline the strong ties of friendship and cooperation between Jamaica and the United States of America. It has further strengthened the partnership that has existed long before the formal establishment of diplomatic relations in 1962. It has allowed us to convey in person to the President of the United States of America the gratitude of the government and people of Jamaica for the high levels of support provided by the United States to Jamaica over the years. And Joshua, we are not shy in asking you to further that appreciation too. Very well. It has provided a platform for further collaboration between Jamaica and the United States on trade and investment, on economic reform, on energy, on security, and on education and training. It revealed the readiness of the President to have his administration follow up actively on the points made by Jamaica and CARICOM, and to have the process of engagement continued going forward. It sent excellent signals to the global community on the respect being accorded to Jamaica at the international level. It showed that Jamaica is on the right track with our economic program and will buttress our efforts to promote further economic growth with job creation. It will be good for the image of Jamaica as a tourist destination in our main market, the United States and elsewhere. It led to the signing of a letter of intent between Jamaica and the United States to pursue the development and deployment of energy-related technologies. Through this instrument, we aim to encourage increased bilateral trade, accelerate the development of emerging technologies and industries, and pave the way for future technological innovation in energy-related fields. It also provided a platform to discuss regional and hemispheric developments, including relations with our closest neighbor, Cuba, and our expectations from the Summit of the Americas that was hosted by Panama. And we also used the opportunity to have brief exchanges on multilateral development issues, including climate change. I had to be full in my presentation because it is not every day that a president of the United States visits our shores. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. You were, in fact, very full with your presentation. And now we open the floor for questions. And you know what the rules are. We take one and a follow-up, and if we have the time, we'll go around the room again.
Vashon Brown, TVJ. The President has come and gone. What happens now? How do we capitalize on the visit by the President?
I think that the President himself had sent a signal, more than one signal. He spoke to the follow-up procedures that should include collaboration between his people and our people. That's a bilateral. He repeated that as far as the CARICOM meeting was concerned, and with respect, I think he went even a little further with the CARICOM meeting when he suggested or agreed with a recommendation that was made by the heads of government that a task force should be established to deal with certain of the issues that had been put forward. Let me end by saying this. As you would expect, there was some kind of skepticism on the part of the heads of government of CARICOM before the meeting, because this was the third time that President Obama was to interface with CARICOM heads. He had done so in Trinidad and Tobago, he had done so in Cartagena, and he was to do so last week here in Jamaica. After that meeting, it seems to me that all of the heads of government were satisfied that moving forward there was good platform so to do.
Vashon, you have a follow-up.
At the town hall meeting, he announced a youth initiative, education initiative. How are we going to make use of that? How are we going to capitalize on that initiative?
It is his initiative. And it seems to me that I don't know that we can make any plans without their. Please, Joshua, if you'd wish to help us. He's in a far better position than I am.
Sure. First, on the question of capitalization and how to capitalize afterwards, Both at the President's visit and earlier at the Vice President's Caribbean Energy Security Summit, there were announced several facilities for investment in U.S. investment in renewable energies. And so the obvious step on how to capitalize on these multi-million and even multi-hundred-million-dollar funds is to increase the opportunities for investment in renewable energies, whether in Jamaica or in other Caribbean markets. And so, we look forward to working with the government of Jamaica on those sorts of investments and making the regulatory and other environment attractive for that investment. Because the way that the Overseas Private Investment Corporation works, it's not the U.S. government comes in and builds, owns, and operates something like other governments do. What we do is we provide private capital and private capital guarantees to private sector investors to carry out the projects. So we look forward to similar projects like the Blue Mountain Renewables Energy Farm or the Solaris, the largest solar project here in Jamaica. It's also the largest solar project in the Caribbean. Now on the youth initiative, first, the $68 million initiative is for investment across the hemisphere in education, youth training, teacher training to help prepare the next generation. Jamaica has about 2/3, I think, under 35, and similar demographics hold true throughout the hemisphere. And to prepare those upcoming workforce to engage in the 21st century economy. Specifically on the Young Leaders of the America initiative, as the minister said, it's going to start this year with a small initiative, but it's going to be expanding to 250 fellows next year. I encourage everyone in the room to look at how the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI, and the Young Southeast Asia Leaders Initiative, YSEALI, have worked. It's going to be a very similar program. People are basically going to go for a summer, embed within a corporation or an organization, and develop their ideas, and ideas that connect their country with the United States.
Thank you very much, Josh. Wonderful. And we are going to take the Gleaner. Andre?
Yes, Andre Poiser from the Gleaner. My question has to do with security. The issue of ISIS operating in the Caribbean has come to face us more boldly in the face this week with that particular story of the young man who was suspected. And I want to know if this featured in the discussions on security cooperation with the U.S., and this is for Joshua, is the issue of ISIS in the Caribbean a concern for the U.S.?
So for the first question, part of the question, I'll defer to the minister.
Fine. As you can well imagine, the Secretariat, the CARICOM Secretariat, is going to address these matters, in a full way. But the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago did raise the issue. And even though we have not yet settled the situation, you remember, as a general, the United States had spoken to some countries in the Caribbean, supplying young persons to this group. It is really in the hands of the security forces. We have not heard definitively that any such person, well, there is one right now. A decision is to be given either today or tomorrow on the young person. I make no comment, therefore, on that. Still in the courts. But I cannot go any further than what the Minister of National Security has said on the matter. But as I say, it was raised by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago.
Now on the question of whether the United States has a concern about the Caribbean, what I would say is that we have a global concern about the efforts of this group to recruit young people, disillusioned young people anywhere in the world. We've seen that it's been a concern in the United States. We've had several recent indictments and some guilty pleas of young people who have been recruited And we have to say that this is a responsibility of all countries, especially all democratic countries, to push back against this extremist ideology, to offer the youth alternatives to this sort of extremism. And so, again, our concern is global. This group and others like it have been recruiting at every corner of the world, including in the United States. And so we want to work with our partners, especially our partners within the democratic world, to offer alternatives.
Thank you, Josh. Javon Minto from Nationwide.
All right, thank you. My question is, were concerns raised with the president in regards to the executive decree on Venezuela, and what were his response, and what is the current position on Jamaica re that decree?
Let me answer the second part of your question first. The position of Jamaica is that we hope and we expect and we pray that this apparent conflict or stated conflict between our two close friends, that conflict will be resolved around the diplomatic table. After all, we live in a zone of peace in the Western Hemisphere, and we would wish for that to continue, so that we would hope, and we have placed on the table, that's Jamaica's position, that our two friends will come together and work that out. Well, the president did tell us that he has sent a special envoy to President Maduro in a quest to move along the path that Jamaica has suggested, Jamaica is for. And he told us that. He was not, it wasn't, matter of fact, I think what he said was that Venezuela is not really on his radar. It's not that the conflict, not that, he's not he prefers peace. That is how he addressed it. He prefers peace. And it wasn't raised in any way, in a kind of a quarrel or anything like that. But as you can well imagine, it is an issue, and we all hope that it will be resolved peacefully.
You have a follow-up?
I do have a follow-up. In terms of he's moving towards more dialogue with Cuba, but on the same end, he's using the decree on Venezuela. So it would seem as if there's a sort of a conflict there in terms of approaches. So have you said to him specifically, or the government or the CARICOM region, that the decree cannot work, and it means that the region and Venezuela will be unstable, will not be stable, and then they cannot supply enough oil to the region?
It was placed on the table by some of the heads of government within CARICOM that a different approach might have been better, put it that way. But it wasn't, it is expected. In fact, there's a statement coming out of the Latin American CARICOM initiative, CELAC, that it is better that this apparent conflict be resolved by dialogue. That is the position of Latin America and the Caribbean. Even, and you would have known that UNASUR is even at this moment moving along that line, trying to find a way of it being resolved peacefully and diplomatically. And that really is the position of CARICOM. But to be truthful, some of the CARICOM heads had in fact raised the issue as to whether a different approach could not have been taken than the one that was taken by the executive decree.
Do we have any other question? Oh, great. Keith Collister.
Keith Collister, Jamaica Observer. Can you give us more information on what an economic growth strategy really means, in particular with respect to how the US will actually help us to achieve faster economic growth? You've mentioned a couple of things, OPEC funds and so on, and energy. The finance minister is going to chair the G20 working group, the obvious implication is there any chance of debt relief, or is it that the multilaterals will lend us more money at cheaper rates that we should be hoping for? And all on a related basis, how does this fit into the Caribbean Basin Initiative? Is there going to be the trade piece of what you spoke about? Is it going to be an accelerate? Is that going to now deal with services? And is that where we're going? Is that, and of course the two go together, the debt relief and the trade and export expansion. So.
Well, I'm glad, I'm more than pleased that twofold question.
Oh, just one question.
Well,
No follow-up for you.
no,
I'm looking for a follow-up.
and I, as you can well imagine, I would have preferred if you had waited until the Minister of Finance returned from Washington to ask that question. However, the growth strategy, it certainly it would have to do with how the World Bank assists us further. And that was placed on the table in the bilateral meeting. It was asked as a follow-up to what the Prime Minister had presented in her initial foray. And the President, as I said, he said yes, he agreed that was the route. You're right. There's three-part question. The second part has to do with debt relief. He didn't address that frontally. He didn't. But from our perspective, I think what he was suggesting was that, or coming out of the meeting, not necessarily his suggestion, coming out of the bilateral, that is something that he himself could not push. It is something that we would, the finance minister and his colleagues, would have to raise that with the World Bank and others to see how that would end or pan out. I'm glad you asked about the CBI, because leading up to the visit of the Honorable President, we heard certain statements being made on television and on radio, particularly on your station over there, young man, with the private sector making some very erroneous statements. As a matter of fact, as I said, we have seen articles and we have heard on radio and seen on television private sector representatives making inaccurate statements. Now look, about the Caribbean Basin Initiative. And as you know, the Caribbean Basin Initiative comprises the Caribbean Basin Economic Reform Act, Recovery Act, sorry, and the Caribbean Trade Partnership Act. We are hearing calls for increased market access for goods under the CBI, and comments that the CBI has gone off the United States radar. Perish the thought. As a matter of fact, in the United States President's trade agenda for 2015, it is called Made in America. The CBI is cited as the vehicle for trade and investment with the Caribbean countries. It's not me, say so. Huh? And the extract from the 2015 trade agenda states as follows, and I'm going to quote: most of the Caribbean enjoys preferential access to the United States through our only permanent preference program, known as the Caribbean Basin Initiative. In 2015, we will continue our engagement with the region to encourage even greater trade and investment. The USA has recently sought and received a new most favored nation waiver for the CBI in the WTO. You will recall that concerned about the underutilization of the CBI framework by Jamaican exporters. The United States Embassy in June of last year sponsored Andrea Ewart, an international trade lawyer and trade consultant from the USA, to hold several workshops in Jamaica. So when your station was told by private sector persons that the CBI is off, indeed, is off the radar, I don't know where that came from. It's a dream. And I'm reminded that over 75% of Jamaica's trade enters the United States duty-free under this kind of initiative. The truth is that Jamaica has not made the optimum use, Mr. Collister, the private sector has not made the optimum use of the duty-free market access under the CBI over the last 32 years since 1983. That's a fact. And there is now the proposal that an effort, as you say, should be made to have trade in services covered by the CBI. Now, that's a private sector initiative. Private sector initiative. And we await the proposals emanating from the group that is putting that forward. And when we hear the proposal, then if help can be given, be it. But the CBI, please, and I'll be very grateful, very grateful if you invite your private sector colleagues to examine what we have just put forward, we have just said. The CBI is really the vehicle. That's the vehicle. And by the way, let me repeat, it is not by no means off the United States radar. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Keith. You have a follow-up after your 3 questions before?
Well, I was trying to do a 3-part follow-up. On the issue of financing, you're saying that you said that CARICOM didn't address that with shifting from Jamaica to CARICOM. Did CARICOM address the issue of debt relief as well?
No, I don't recall that coming up in a CARICOM meeting.
Okay.
This one.
Not this
it
one.
It might have been.
In past
yes,
meetings,
it might have been.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
On the issue of the CBI, I think you make a good point. So you're saying, was there any discussion on the services issue? I'll give you an example.
No, there weren't in-depth discussion on services. It was put on the table, but there wasn't any in-depth discussion on services.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then on the issue, you made a reference to, with respect to CARICOM, the financial sector pressures. I'm assuming, can you just clarify what you mean by that? Is it that you're talking about issues such as countries such as Bahamas and Cayman with respect to offshore jurisdictions and so on?
No, I think it had to do with offshore banking and and you just call the Bahamas. I think perhaps it was more reference like to Antigua and Barbuda.
Okay,
I'm
with you.
Yes,
I'm with you.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thanks, Keith.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before we come to you, Vashon, let me see. Is there anyone who hasn't? Damien Phillips from CVM. Can you get the microphone? We'll come back to you, Vashon.
Afternoon, team. Minister, are you able to, and Minister, Ministers, are you able to state what is the cost of hosting the U.S. President here to Jamaica? Are you able to state for us? What are the numbers?
I can give some answer to that. We're not able to give you a figure yet, but I'll tell you broadly what areas of cost, and we can give you later down. We'll have costs for additional security. The JDF had to bring out its reserve. We will have costs. We did some road works, as you are aware of. We also have costs relating to the coverage, the television coverage of the event, because we had to give feeds to the international entities that came with us. So those are the major costs that we expect. But we will give you a final figure when we have them collated.
Just to follow up on that, anything to be worried about in terms of the costing? I know you can't mention an amount right now clearly, but did we plan effectively for this? Where the money is coming from? We know it's taxpayers' money, of course, but where is it coming from?
I think in terms of the road works, I think we will do some reallocation. And as the minister said, that some of those works were just brought forward. They were budgeted for and were brought forward. In terms of the security bill, I don't think they're going to be that huge so that we can't meet them from our budgeted.
And finally, just to follow up with the name evading me, Joshua. What's the latest that you have on that Caucasian male that threw that item over the U.S. Embassy a few days ago?
We don't have any updates due to privacy concerns. We would have to refer you to the Jamaican authorities, but all we can confirm he was a U.S. citizen, and beyond that, we have to defer to our Jamaican counterparts.
I won't comment on that. I think we can ask the police about their investigation. You have a question? Can Rashawn, sorry. We won't.
Who have a question? You won't deny it?
No.
All right.
Good afternoon, Minister. I'm Alicia Smith Edwards from GIS. You had said that, I think you said the Prime Minister had said that the U.S. intends to permit the export of natural gas to Jamaica. Could you say when that would happen?
Yes. I don't know if Joshua can take us very far with that, but that wasn't out of the bilateral that was held here. You remember Vice President Biden had some heads of government from the CARICOM region up in Washington in January. It was January.
Yes.
In January. And it was out of that meeting that comment came. It didn't come from the bilateral. I don't trust why we anything further.
So the question on the export of petroleum products, that's a national security concern dating back, I believe, to the Cold War. And the president has now authorized private companies to export. I can't say exactly if it was in if he put that waiver forward in 2014 or 2013, but it's been more than it was not this year. And so at this point, it's up to Jamaica to have the facilities to receive the liquefied natural gas, and I believe that's a question of construction. And so it's a question of Jamaica being prepared to receive those exports, and I believe the facilities in Louisiana, if not already online, will be online within a few months. But basically, what the president has done is removed a national security prohibition on the export, and it's now up to private sector organizations to come and make those deals.
And all of that is part of the encouragement of the private sector in the United States to invest.
Yes.
In Jamaica.
And part of that is in ensuring that Jamaica, as part of, as a country that is affected by global climate change, takes steps not just to mitigate, but also take steps to be an example for the region and truthfully for the globe on its own domestic energy market, using clean hydrocarbons and domestic renewable sources of energy.
we take one more question, one question from Vashon, and then we take two more questions after that. Vashon?
Do I have those two as well?
No, you don't.
Right.
We have to share, Vashon.
In that same week that the president visited, we saw a think tank report in Washington which said that Jamaica has the most austere budget in the world. How do you respond to that?
Was that your question?
I don't know. That is an opinion of a newspaper or whoever said that. But I don't know that the Minister of Finance was saying that it was an easy budget. You put it this way. From my perspective, you are not going to have any easy budgets at about this time. It's not going to happen. What we are very grateful about is that the several sectors in Jamaica up to now have really come on board and have seemed to understand what we are going through, and we have to give thanks for that. We have to give thanks, for example, that we haven't had any kind of demonstration, you know, the kind of things we used to have in the past, and some countries have gone through that recently. But austere, we just have to face the music, put it that way.
Keith?
In a way, that was one of my questions, but that's great. When you say face the music,
Yeah.
what is your current thinking as to the likelihood that the multilaterals will agree to give us a slightly better deal? For example, if perhaps fully fund the IMF program as opposed to relying on Petro-Carib. Is that something that is understood and spoken about at the highest level, say a 1% loan for 30 years? I think that would be helpful.
Keith, I do not know of the details of the discussions. Perhaps I should. But from the perspective of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, if you had asked me that question 3 or 4 years ago, I would be telling you there is not a hope. Not a hope. What we have seen, I think, and I'll dilate on it a little more tomorrow morning, a statement I'll make in the Senate. What we have seen, and I believe that, strongly believe, that the visit of the President to Jamaica at this point in time points to the kind of international profile that Jamaica should have and to which we have been accustomed over the years. I don't know that that we can be shy in saying that the international organizations that are to take on board anything that we put before them at this point in time, I don't think we should be shy, Jamaica should be shy in saying that we are in a better position now than we were 3 or 4 years ago. I cannot tell you, and that again I apologize, I probably should know the details of the discussions that are taking place within the halls of the Ministry of Finance, the Group of 77 and the like. I probably should know. But from our perspective, we believe that we are in a better position, certainly, to be listened to, at the very least, and for it to be acted upon because of the way we have conducted ourselves over these past 3 years.
Thank you. We're going to take one question from Andre, and we take the final question from Jevon.
Ambassador Robotham, I don't want you to be left out. An important part of getting trade going and making full use of CBI is for Jamaica itself to prepare, and a part of that preparation is for companies to be able to meet the requirements of traceability laws and international standards organizations and the certifications that they require for export. Where are we in terms of implementation of ISO in Jamaica and meeting those traceability requirements.
Okay, Minister. Would we ask our permanent secretary? Sometimes it's better to hear from the technical people, you know. That's better. The politicians might put a glass on it, which you know.
I agree.
Thank you, Minister. Well, that question perhaps will be best addressed to JAMPRO and the Bureau of Standards, but I know that we do receive technical assistance from some of our international partners, such as the European Union, in terms of preparing us for effectively utilizing the EPA. And I think the skills and expertise that we get from that sector would stand us in good stead for other markets as well. So that's a part of the program of the PIOG and the Ministry to promote technical cooperation, to build capacity in the private sector to be able to export effectively. Because as the Minister has said, our problem is not so much market access. Our problem really relates to supply side constraints, tradable services, and even in goods to be able to produce in the quantities required and the quality required. And you have raised the additional point of standards that have to be met. And so it's just a matter of working closely with our international trading partners, Canada, USA, Europe being the main ones, to understand better what the requirements are and to try to equip the private sector to be able to meet those requirements. And we're working our best to make that happen.
Javon?
All right, I'm still on Venezuela, Minister. I want to ask if it is your opinion that the U.S. is using these newly announced energy projects to wean Jamaica and the region from Venezuela, while Venezuela still maintains its stance that it's a socialist country and it will continue to clamp down on what it sees as dissent. And Mr. Polacek, I'm asking for a response from you, and I'm also asking for a substantial reason to your answer. Sir Nicholson.
Why should just take Joshua all over?
I would have to say that our stance on energy is that the Caribbean writ large and Jamaica specifically has some of the highest energy costs in the globe, and that these countries are also, the CARICOM countries, are also the countries that are facing some of the worst, not the worst, but some of the worst potential effects of global climate change, and that by becoming energy markets through domestic, clean, renewable sources of energy, these countries benefit both in their balance of payments, in the bringing down the cost of energy, which is a major constraint on economic growth, and by being both a economic model but also a moral model on the issue of global climate change and having a positive energy market. I think those three reasons are far and away enough to want to encourage this sort of development in the Caribbean energy market, and for any other issues that might arise out of that, I think those three issues by far and away trump it.
Thank you. We take the last question from...
Thank you.
No, the most I will say on that, you know, I mean, Joshua has really answered it, but the most I will say on that,
Minister.
yes, but listen, regardless of motives, reasons, or whatever, never look a gift horse in the mouth.
Damian?
Minister Nicholson, we had Caribbean leaders here at our disposal for several hours. What discussions did we have with them off the record, officially if you may, in terms of dealing with any issues that we might have with them? I'm now looking at Jamaicans being held in certain countries, Bahamas, Trinidad, and the general treatment of our people while there. What are those discussions? What were those discussions like, if in fact they were raised? And also, we understand from England, Jamaica, what is in fact doing in that regard, and how are we dealing with all those cases?
What in England? What?
Some Jamaicans being sent back from England. Are you aware of some of those cases and how we're...
You mean sent back from England? But that's everyday thing.
No.
Look.
No, what I'll do is speak to you thereafter, Minister.
Yeah.
But talk to us now about the discussions had with Caribbean leaders.
Okay.
And how we're dealing with that.
Well, the truth is that we had bilateral with the Bahamians. That is the one that is really on the table right now. Of course, you know that over time we have been dealing with Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados and the like, and those are ongoing. But something happened, raised its head recently in the Bahamas, which we thought that we should address. And we are comforted by what we are told by not only by the Prime Minister but also the Minister of Foreign Affairs, that the issues are being addressed. And most of what happened in the Bahamas recently really is geared towards Haiti and not Jamaica or anywhere else, most of it. But as far as it touched on concerned citizens, Jamaican citizens who are there, we had a bilateral with them on that score, and it's ongoing.
Thank you, Minister. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, thank you for coming, and we want to thank our viewers on the PBCJ and those on the World Wide Web. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, PS. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone. Thank you.